Chapter 2. Colin never could believe the view. Over 2 years now since he stepped up to lead Sigma 3's genetic engineering project, and the vast golden plains that surrounded Sigma Central took his breath away. Marilyn and Colin, city kids at heart, never expected to feel at home in the middle of the country. But there was something special about this place. Central was a place where all facets of Sigma met. Data collected from Sigma 2's satellites was shared with research for Sigma 5's space colony program. The great minds of engineering amassed from around the globe helped both Sigma 1 in the construction of the Exodus Armada's interstellar fleet and the Sigma 4 deep Earth drills. The sheer intellectual energy of the place was undeniable, but Colin always felt like he was only moments away from drowning. While Marilyn now operated as the face of his department and always had his back when advocating with the top brass, everything remained precarious. Their positions, the project, the world at large, everything except their bond. Colin and Marilyn were married in a quiet ceremony with only a few guests, including Julian, the only real friend in Colin's life, and Lila, another Sigma 3 scientist who had become Marilyn's closest confidant. They did it at sunset out on the western viewing platform. Colin surprised her with 2 rings made from meteorite fragments that Julian acquired from a contact in Sigma 5. "Nice touch, buddy," Julian winked as he handed off the rings on the big day. "You owe me one." That had been the happiest day of Colin's entire life. Yet all of that was before what had become known as the Reed incident. Years of preparation meant nothing when their first trial subject went haywire. The MEG, or Mind-Enhanced Genome Set, was Colin's most treasured creation, his flagship, the culmination of his life's work. And it had ended in blood. Behind him, the sliding doors of their apartment opened. Marilyn was home from her meeting on the top levels. Colin turned and tried to read her look. Her first stop was their drink cart. "News that good, huh?" Marilyn gave him a sad smile as she prepared 2 Moscow mules. Colin left the grand view behind, wondering how much longer it would be his. The couple sat together on the couch and cleaned their glasses. Even in his lowest moments, she was still right here with him. One more test. That's all they'll allow. Colin absorbed that. "Okay, I think we've sorted the kinks in the Meg set. We'll be ready this time. It won't be... No more Meg subjects." "What?" "But we're talking about the evolution of the human mind. This has been what it's all been about." "We have other subjects, Clive. Other genome sets." Of course she was right. The mind-enhancing set was just one of many, yet it was the project with the grandest ambition. When Colin took the lead on Sigma 3's human genetic engineering, it was the mind that fascinated him the most. Those at the top had always been more focused on the creation of superhuman physical specimens who might survive in deep space with fewer constraints, or, as Clive always suspected and feared, super soldiers to head off simmering conflict around the world. Colin had no desire to create the next great weapon. In fact, an early discovery that held promising results for adrenaline-boosting effects was shelved, by Colin's own orders, hidden away from the top brass in the fear that it could be easily exploited for genetic hack jobs by wannabe commandos. "This goes against everything for which we've fought." Marilyn reached out and took his hand. "You're not making monsters. These effects could still be life-changing. Wound recovery, muscular development." Their twin meteorite rings twinkled in the fading sunlight of the day. And Julian's agreed. He wants to be our alpha subject. Our alpha and omega. If it doesn't work. If it does, they are willing to reconsider and fund another round. Maybe then, Marilyn trailed off. "I won't lie to you, but don't you think it's worth a shot?" The entire genome project was fraught with uncertainty. First, viable test subjects were identified through blood tests and physicals. From there, they were sorted into trial groups. The MEG subjects, the physical growth or PGG subjects, and the recovery rate or RRG subjects. Colin and his team created specific retroviruses for each genome set. Over the course of the last year, these subjects were injected with the sleep reagent viruses, with the goal of bonding them across the adult subject's entire genetic makeup. From there, hypothetically at least, the viruses could all be switched on at the same time, setting into motion a rapid transformation of the subject's former genome. Despite Colin's misgivings, Julian had become one of their RRG trial subjects. Now, his good friend was the last thing standing between Colin and professional disgrace. "Okay," Colin murmured, coming out of his daze of disappointment. He squeezed Marilyn's hand. "What are we waiting for? Let's get prepped." "Are you kidding? I was born ready." Julian was strapped into the activation vessel that always reminded Colin of a chrome sarcophagus. Lila rolled her eyes. "You say that now." "What? It's all going to be fine." Julian was his usual breezy self, despite the metal bars that held him into place. Sigma brass weren't willing to risk another experiment gone wrong. There were other soldiers in the room, Julian's own team, who stood ready to execute their own captain should another Reed incident come to pass. Colin watched the exchange between Julian and Lila with interest. In his years with Marilyn, he'd become better at picking up on body language. Though there was nothing obvious on the surface, Colin detected an undeniable attraction between the two. It wasn't a pair anyone would predict. Lila was steely-eyed and indomitable, a keen scientific mind who actually reminded Colin a lot of himself. That's why he'd brought her onto the project in the first place. Transferred from Sigma 3's other wing devoted to genetic alteration of crops and other organic material. However, in the years since then, Marilyn had grown very close to Lila. "She's not who you think she is," Marilyn had once explained to Colin after another stilted dinner in their apartment. "She's intimidating, sure, and I respect that. I respect that a lot. But don't you see it in her eyes? She's desperately human." "Desperate for what?" Colin had questioned. "What are any of us desperate for? Love? Acceptance? Survival? Whatever it is, it's people like her that you want on your side. The dedicated ones." So Colin followed his wife's intuition and brought Lila deeper into the fold. It had been the right choice. When the Meg experiment went wrong, it was Lila who saved their entire team. While Reed, their subject, died in the process, the rest of Colin's Sigma 3 division, and maybe even all of Sigma Central, owed their lives to Lila. Maybe that's what did it, Colin thought as Lila left Julian's side, but not without one last look over her shoulder. Heroes fall for heroes. Like clockwork, Colin spotted it. Julian winked at Lila, who turned away, blushing. Colin held himself back from laughing. Now wasn't the time. His friend's life was on the line, and for what? My ego. No, he couldn't let himself think like that. While an enhanced recovery rate wasn't the same thing as unlocking the hidden depths of consciousness, it could still change the world, one drop at a time, as Marilyn liked to say. He would do his duty. "Okay, Julian, time to go under." Julian grew serious. He gave Colin a nod as the lid of the activation chamber was shut. Lila moved to Colin's side behind the glass partition in the lab. With a hiss, sleeping gas filled Julian's tank. His eyes fluttered, then closed. "Subject ready," Lila reported, checking Julian's signs of life. "Activate." Colin didn't hesitate. He never did. When moments like this finally came, his choice had already been made. There was no use fighting it now. A blue light flashed from within the activation chamber. All they could do now was wait, and see if the next stage of humanity was truly within reach. Their apartment was boxed up. The dream was over. They were merely moving a few floors down, and Marilyn had kept her position within Sigma bureaucracy, but Colin knew that this was the end of something. While the top brass promised that they would find him a new project soon, Colin was certain that he was being put out to pasture. Damaged goods. Luckily, Julian lived through the experiment, but the RRG set failed to move mountains. While the Sigma soldier's genetic makeup was successfully altered, he gained only a minor healing factor in exchange. "Guess I'm not Superman, huh, Doc?" Julian took it in stride, though he knew Colin was crushed. "But hey, the next time I cut myself shaving, I won't sweat it." Colin put on a false smile and accepted the sympathies of everyone on his team. It was only Lila who never said a word about his grand failure either way. He took it that the failure hit her as hard as it did him. Still, it took him by surprise when Marilyn told him that Lila and Julian had both resigned from Sigma. It hurt him even more than losing his position. It was Lila, wasn't it? She stopped looking at me in the eye after the failed RRG trial. "I don't understand how she can turn away when we were so close." Marilyn sighed. It rubbed Colin the wrong way, as if she was dealing with a child. "Well, you're the one who was able to get through that ice-cold exterior, am I wrong?" They're starting a family, Clive. It was his and Marilyn's first night in their much smaller apartment. No more Moscow mules, only a jug of bottom-shelf Morton Farms wine from the finest vines in Ohio, to accompany some mess hall pizza coated in lab-grown Sigma sausage, along with a view of the loud, crowded transit terminal. He knew where Marilyn wanted to take this conversation. Ever since the RRG trial, the hints grew in number. She wanted to start a family too, and it filled Colin with a darker fear than he'd ever known. He tried to play it off. Look around, do you see room for a crib? The caveman pulled it off without electricity. Plus, all those saber-toothed tigers. We live at Sigma Central, the most advanced human achievement in history. I think we can support a baby. Colin poured another glass. He didn't answer. He let the conversation die. He felt a piece of Marilyn die along with it. He hated himself. He sipped his wine. We don't have all the time in the world, you know. Every day, it's running out. Marilyn went to bed and left Colin on the couch. Unfortunately, he had no idea how true those words were. A few months passed. While Marilyn spent her days bustling through Central, lobbying for startup funding for the next joint venture, Colin wasted away at home. He flipped through his old journals, but his mind atrophied. He just didn't see the point. One night, Marilyn came home with big news. Her forehead gleamed with sweat, as if she had just run all the way from the top levels. Time to wake up, Clive. The name Preston Swift mean anything to you? Preston Swift, billionaire, entrepreneur, and famous recluse. His seed money had planted the trees for many Sigma projects in the past. Without Swift, there would be no Exodus Armada project at all. Yet he never showed his face at Central, or anywhere else for that matter. He operated in the shadows. He wants to meet immediately. When Colin didn't respond, Marilyn grew angry. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Suddenly, Marilyn stumbled. She toppled to the floor. Colin's mind went blank. He pulled her up onto the couch. She was still sweating heavily and her skin was pallid. Even her red hair seemed drained of life. I'm okay. Just been a long day. Colin got her some water and nursed her back to stability. Still, her chest heaved with every other breath, and her hands were clammy and cold. How long have you been feeling like this? She shrugged and looked away, tears in her eyes. A few days. It's nothing, just the bug going round the top levels. Colin was stricken by guilt. How did I just notice? How couldn't I have seen it? He rushed her to the hospital wing. The doctors detected a strange murmur in her heart and signs of influenza. They forced Colin to wear PPE before he could go into her room to see her again. Marilyn was clearly exhausted. She could barely keep her eyes open, but she held out her hand when she saw him. Colin took it, a protective glove keeping their skin apart. Clive. He leaned in closer. I'm right here. I'll be right here as long as it takes. No. Suddenly that old familiar light flooded her features. She tried to sit up. The monitors beeped and screeched in response until she fell back against her pillow. Swift, you need to go. What? He'd forgotten all about the billionaire and his offer. Marilyn, you're sick. You need me here. No, Clive. I need you to be yourself again. I can't see you like this anymore. Swift, he told me he had an offer, an opportunity, something the world has never seen before. Marilyn was racked with another coughing fit. Colin was totally inept in the face of her pain. When she settled again, Marilyn locked eyes with the man she loved more than anything. He told me Clive Colin was the only man for the job.